This week it was the release of the RTX 5090 and the 5080. The 5090 reviews occurred last week, as we all know. 5080 reviews this week. I'd say that the response was ultimately mediocre to downright hostile. And we're going to talk about it. I'm actually just going to rattle through some supporter questions here. Because it kind of covers off most of the key points of contention and the controversy surrounding the 5080 specifically. This one from Choose Frames. Ahoy, hoy, gents. Do you think the RTX 5080 is a good product and offer for customers? Your analysis shows it leads in price to performance, yet something feels off to me. The 80 series card performs poorly compared to a 90 series older sibling more than ever before. It suggests a shift in stack branding that places the 80 series streets behind more so than in previous generations, making it feel like a less sensible investment. Thanks. Kind of gets to the nub of the problem here, which is that the concept of value is a double-edged sword. If you are going to be comparing the 5080 to the 4090 and the 5090, then the price versus performance ratio is obviously better. But you expect that from products as you go down the stack. You should be getting proportionately more value from your product the cheaper the card gets. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the way things are sort of looking here, which is that you've got these super expensive products where it does compare favorably for price versus performance, as you would expect. But then you've got the fact that in terms of expectation of what this product is delivering, it is falling short. And I think you guys actually in your NVIDIA DF specials kind of laid down a marker where you said, actually, based on everything we're seeing here, it's looking like an iterative bump, more like a super product. I think that was you pretty much paraphrasing exactly what you said, Alex. Mm-hmm, so we were going into this expecting that. The question is whether DLSS 4 is a strong enough feature to offset that. I'd say this is a big discussion we need to have. But then there's the concept of expectation from a new generation. Where do you sit on this one, Alex? Because what can I say? I'm kind of, I just have no real enthusiasm for this product. It is the best product, the best GPU you can buy for $1,000 according to the numbers, but it's not. The way I've been phrasing the question is the performance worthy of the name? When you think of an 80 class product, there are certain expectations when it arrives, and I'm not sure it does meet those expectations.
I'd agree with that. And I think the unlaunching button that occurred with the 4080 12 gigabyte might have been prudent here, actually, because when you got a 3080 or even a 2080 or a 4080 16 gigabyte, which was priced poorly at its launch, you at least were really hammering the old 90 series or the highest end series in some capacity. 2080 had much richer feature set, similar performance in a lot of titles, which then years down the line was very beneficial to this GPU. 3080, a killer GPU, really just wrecked the 2080 Ti. It was amazing. And then the 4080, really poorly priced, but at least it was better than a 3090, right? Measurably so in a lot of metrics. So, and in this case, you're getting it's like a really small price drop on what have been a 4080 or a 4080S.
It's like the same price.
Yeah. Well, yeah, with a little bit better performance in a number of titles, right? Like you measured like 10 to 11-ish, I think, in the 4K range. And I think it drops as you go down to 1440p. And for me, that just is not at all exciting enough from the base perspective. MFG is something we're going to talk about in the future, but I think just even like from the base perspective, I really would have really preferred a GPU that performs like a 4090 in nearly all metrics without MFG, and then had a price. Because right now the gulf between 4080 and sorry, 5080 and 5090 is so huge that you're not even filling the market's demands in that area anymore without going back to the previous product. And I don't like that for the GPU stack at all. And what it spells also for things like 5070, 5070 Ti, it just makes the lower areas of the stack also, they're going to be less appealing in a similar manner, I imagine. And then it just calls into question, why is this an entirely new generation? There's a lot that I really wish was done. The 5090 seems cool in its own right, but the 5080 is not a good sign at all of things to come. So I'm pretty disappointed actually in it.
So we're talking about expectations of what we want for the money and also for an 80 class product.
Right.
So, basically to introduce the sort of devil's advocate side of things, a PlayStation 5 still costs the same that it cost at launch. It's now like over 4 years after launch. Same with Xbox. It's on the same process node as the 40 series. For various reasons, cost, and I dare say that NVIDIA just gets more return from putting their AI processors on 3 nanometer. So there's a lot going on here in terms of what kind of products they can actually deliver. There was actually a really interesting breakdown of the bill of materials for the 5090, with just the base processor itself costing about anything from $400 to $560 estimate. Yes, wow. A staggeringly expensive piece of technology to put together. 5080, I'm not sure, because it's essentially half of a 5090, which in itself is a bit problematic. So yeah, it's kind of, I guess they needed to do a new product. I guess it's just not that much more exciting than the previous one. It's a really baffling situation. What do you make of all of this, Oliver?
Well, to me at least, there are 2 key elements to this launch that I'm interested in. The first is the standard price to performance of the card, which on paper relative to the competition is fine. Now, obviously, as you guys have been discussing so far, obviously it's not progressing as we'd like, and obviously relative to the typical pace of GPU advancements, relative to the 40 series, relative to the 30 series, even relative to the 20 series, we're not seeing the advancements that we'd like to see in raw performance per dollar, or even performance on a given level of the product stack. Like, it's really not there for any GPU except arguably for the 5090, which is meaningfully faster in standard workloads than the 4090 there, which is not really as true for the rest of the line. But relative to the current competition, the paper price, the notional price, is very competitive. But I've been doing some research and looking up, and I don't have to do this myself. I have the 2 cards here, but I was looking at what the pricing would be for the typical consumer here. And the actual AIB partners are, in Canada at least, are all pricing well above MSRP, right?
Yeah.
Almost all the cards are coming in at the equivalent of $1,200 USD for the 5080, and in some cases well above. And that's just on paper, right? That's not necessarily the retail price. It's also not necessarily the price that you'll actually pay on reseller sites like eBay. So I'm really worried about that. And then the 5090s, the typical price of a 5090 in Canada, the MSRP for a partner card 5090 is $2,500 American dollars and above. It's like big increases over the, and that's just the paper price, right? In reality, everything's out of stock on day one, pretty much. And that's a bad experience. And I'm sure lots of things are selling now on eBay for much, much inflated prices, or at least that I've seen. But then meanwhile, the situation with other cards is not very good either. The 4080s are out of stock and have been for a long time, probably with no hope of restock there. The only card that's in this kind of bracket of performance that I can buy is I can go on Newegg right now and I can buy a 7900 XTX for the Canadian equivalent of about $900. Retail, I can buy that card right now. So that availability is good. Price performance is also pretty okay there, relatively speaking, relative to the other cards in this that we're talking about, at least for, raster workloads. But I'm really worried about demand there, and I'm really worried about the pricing, and I'm just worried about things staying in stock. And I'm also worried about, especially with FP4 acceleration and stuff like this, these are going to be cards that are in demand for non-gaming uses, for AI uses. This might be another repeated like the 2016 crypto boom thing, and that'd
Oh,
just
no.
be a disaster. So that's my concern. But the second concern, which is
Yep.
a little bit more optimistic and a little bit happier, is frame generation, because after using it on the 5090 MFG in particular, I'm kind of really happy with it, especially on a higher refresh rate display. Now that's potentially a transformative experience even versus the 4080 potentially, but it's like really specific. You need to have good base frame rates. You need to have a high refresh rate display. You need to be happy with a certain caliber of visual experience in that display, working from a base frame rate of at least, I'd say, 60 FPS for most games, especially faster paced ones. So if you are in that situation and you are using MFG, then I think it can be a very meaningful upgrade. And in general, just adapting your own preferences and setup to work well with AI rendering paradigms is, I think, a good idea, because we're not seeing as much advancement in other paradigms of rendering as we'd like to see. So yeah, that's my only other thought. Like, I wouldn't discount MFG, and I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years everyone is just dialing in MFG on every single title with their high refresh rate monitors, and there's almost no expectation that you wouldn't be using frame generation of a certain kind. I wouldn't be surprised to see that become the standard. But in terms of the hardware for consumers, obviously the GPUs aren't there yet totally in terms of availability. And then the monitors also, you need to get like a really good like 4K 240 hertz monitor is kind of a minimum. Like 240 hertz is kind of the starting point for this MFG experience, this MFG Wonderland, to me at least. So yeah, just kind of a couple thoughts there. But my immediate concern is just availability, because the availability is really bad and the prices are higher than
absolutely.
you'd expect.
We got this question from Diehard X86. Now that we know that RTX 5080 and 5090 launch was not a launch, when do you think it will actually launch? I mean,
I don't know.
I think, well, I've got a number of thoughts on this, which is that, and it's really weird. Why is there no decent pre-order system set up? You're sort of hammering your website of choice literally the minute that the launch goes live. It's a really bad consumer experience. It's not great. Why can't you just pre-order one like weeks in advance? I don't understand why this is so difficult to do. I'm entirely in agreement with you on the pricing thing, Oliver, and I'll tell you why. If the AIB cards for the 5080 are $1,200, that puts you back in exactly the same pricing that the 4080 was at launch back in 2022, where it got hammered. Rightly so, which caused the 4080 Super refresh to come in at $1,000. Yeah, I mean, those MSRP cards need to come out. That's the bottom line. That's the only way you can really justify it. It seems that pricing across the board is really not in a good place. And secondly, in terms of the availability thing, there's something else which we need to factor in here, and something John told me about this morning, where the My Life in Gaming guys were looking to buy 5080s but couldn't. The reason why is really simple. They're worried about the tariff situation that may kick in under the new presidential administration. So, it could be the case that prices of GPUs get even more expensive. So they were looking to buy now and potentially, because they want to upgrade, buy now and then potentially bypass those potential tariffs. It's really not great across the board. Yeah, I just think if you're going to launch something, obviously it needs to be available and readily available. It just doesn't really make sense otherwise. Let's talk about some more questions from supporters here. Some guy person says, why on earth do people think the 5080 needs to be a serious upgrade from the 4080 they already allegedly have, even though hardly anyone bought that SKU? You never need to upgrade we never need to upgrade when a brand new GPU generation comes out. I'm still using the 2060 Super in my PC with my LG C3 monitor. Is it a good setup? No! Exclamation point. That's why I'm trying to buy a 5080. Can I still play games on my GPU and have a good time with it? Absolutely! Exclamation point. Do I have VRR? Unfortunately, no.
No.
You lose that with a DisplayPort 1.4 to HDMI 2.1 cable. The only way I can get to 4K 120 with my setup. The 5080.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Is really, hold on, I have to expand this. This is a long question. The 5080 is really the most GPU I could use, and it's still a massive upgrade for me. Can you put all these haters in their place? Oh, man. Yeah, the concept of console generations is in doubt, and I think now the concept of GPU generations is in doubt because we do have this $1,000 GPU from NVIDIA, and the other reason why there are justifications for it is that it's the only $1,000 GPU available. Intel don't have one. And AMD don't have one. Now, maybe their 70 class products that are going to come along will be as amazing as these leaked benchmarks are saying, which changes the conversation entirely. But for right now, that's pretty much the only thing you can buy. Really, really tricky. Let's have a look at this question. Yeah, Garton Reiser. With both AMD and NVIDIA kind of skipping this generation, do you see a return to form with the next generation, or do we have to rely on software from now on? Well, obviously we've had Microsoft talking about the biggest technical leap in a console generation. It's going to come from machine learning. Let's be completely honest about it. We've got Mark Cerny saying that the next frontier is basically ray tracing and machine learning with a relatively smaller bump coming from rasterization increases. So that's basically signaling to the world that affordable silicon is going to be rebalancing quote unquote performance between software and hardware features. And we've already seen that to a certain extent, and it's been accepted with DLSS super resolution, right? Because we now know that, well, according to NVIDIA, at least, between 80 to 90% of users are using it. I mean, I use it. I think it's great. So, that's just part of that particular journey. A return to form with the next generation is all going to come down to affordability of the process, ultimately. And for whatever reason, it just didn't happen this time around. What are you expecting, Oliver? I mean, you keep up to speed with fabrication technologies and whatnot.
Sure. 3 nanometer is very expensive. I'm seeing a 3 nanometer wafer is like $18,000, which is like really high.
Okay.
So yeah, it's 3 nanometers is really expensive. And I would expect next generation that we will, just throwing this out there, I think we'll probably see a big improvement, certainly relative to this improvement. Perhaps not as big as the leap from 3000 series to 4000 series, because that was like NVIDIA like skipping a node almost. Really huge improvement there. But like, let's say we're seeing something along the lines of like a 30 or 40% performance improvement, maybe there with similar die sizes, but costs will go up, and therefore profit margins need to be maintained, presumably, and the prices will go up for comparatively sized dies. I can't see any way around that. That'll probably be the case, right, with these new GPUs. So maybe you'll be paying more, you're getting more, paying more, but I don't know that you'll net out on efficiency per dollar there. That'll certainly be interesting to see. I think in general, yeah, it'll everything's coming down to software. I mean, even just like when you look at like a 5090 right now or a 5080 in modern games, there aren't even a ton of games that really take full use of the modern NVIDIA graphics hardware pipeline there. There aren't many games, so it's an issue on the game side as well as an issue on software when it comes to rendering software and things like that. So yeah, I would expect that it needs to improve, but that won't probably be driven by hardware improvements, at least in the medium term.
Okay, any thoughts on this, Alex? Where do you see the next generation going? I mean, I can't see any routes forward where things are going to get cheaper.
No, I mean, I don't see that either. I do think, like Oliver said, there'll be an appreciable bump just due to the node being smaller and all that. And I also think by that time, the greater usage of the transformative technologies in something like an Ada Lovelace GPU or a Blackwell GPU will be in more games, so that we can start saying like, okay, this silicon, which is largely dark for majority of the frame, is actually going to be used for most of the frame. In a couple of years, that'll probably be the case for more titles than it is right now. But I also don't see the situation getting better. It doesn't mean I have to be happy with it, though. Exactly. I'm not happy with it. That's why I'm also just very angry. Not angry. I'm just very disappointed that there's a 4090 sized hole in the stack right now, which could have been filled at launch. Like it should. What if that was the 5080 for a higher price? At least the naming then would be more consistent. With previous generations, people would have at least then have instead of talking about like the naming, the lack of upgrade, they would be talking about how it's an upgrade, but with a price hike, which I think is a better conversation, because it would actually get at the core of the issue better, maybe. So yeah, I'm just not happy all around at the moment. Sorry, but I like MFG. We'll talk about that in some future forum. We're gonna really try and distill that down into a video. I think we could really make something good there. We just got to really think hard about it, and we are thinking hard about it. So
yes, we are.
I am thinking hard about it right now, even. So
yeah. Final question from Richard Ledbest. Rich, I was surprised to see a lot of negative comments under your RTX 5080 review, criticizing your neutral tone and lack of slamming block capitals NVIDIA for this particular release. How do you respond to this criticism, or what's your philosophy on what a review should and shouldn't be in this space? Well, it's really simple, right? I find it really difficult to get sort of furious and upset about a product that you don't need to buy. There is no, you don't need to buy this product, right? There are other products that you can buy that might be better for you. Maybe you get an old secondhand 4080 Super. Maybe you stick with your 30 series if you're not happy. If you don't like it, don't buy it. I don't have any particular sense of entitlement about what NVIDIA should be giving me for the money. It is what it is, right? And if it's not good, you don't buy it. And it's really interesting about this concept of, outrage and anger. Because if you look at, it's really interesting that there's a certain way of presenting things in video form from an influencer perspective. But then you look at reviews on the web. It seems to be like reviews on the web. Yeah, this is a bit mediocre. I was hoping for better. And then, a certain range of influencers are just totally outraged. I kind of sit in the middle, really. I just don't feel any sort of particular sense of entitlement to what a product should be giving me. I tell you what you're getting, whether I think it's good or not. But, my life isn't defined by how powerful an NVIDIA GPU is. So, I find it really sort of hard to get upset about this sort of thing. That's the bottom line.
Love that, Rich. That's great.
I'd also just say that it's still the best product at $1,000. Probably. I mean, it is.
It just doesn't, it's just not exciting.
It's not exciting.
It's just mediocre. Yeah.
But also I don't know, just thinking back, this is going back 15 years or something, but I remember reading publications in 2010 and 2011 that were talking about the problem of dark silicon and the problem of new processes, and were predicting that process technology would basically stop for consumer level purposes, at least by 2020. And we've pushed past that by some margin, but clearly we're running into the same problems. So this is just a problem it's affecting everyone. You look across the entire industry, the semiconductor industry, people producing SoCs, whatever. Any product, any manufacturer, everyone's running into these problems with high-end nodes. So to me, it's NVIDIA is caught up in the same tidal wave as everyone else. They're not capable of pushing past, and in a meaningful sense in terms of scaling in lithography. And that's just how it is. Scaling at lithography for a certain price point, certainly, and scaling in lithography in general. So that's a tough problem, but NVIDIA has got some solutions to that problem, namely MFG and neural rendering, and that'll take some time to come online.
Right.
But they are trying to approach it from different angles, and that's encouraging. So it's not a totally lost hope, but you need to look for it in different places, basically, is my perspective, right?
Yeah, and this isn't specifically an NVIDIA thing. I remember when the 7900 XTX and XT came about, people were really upset by that because they were expensive and they were expecting AMD to deliver, a cheaper product, which they kind of did. But it was still too expensive for them. And, people were really upset about that. I was not happy with the fact that the XT offered proportionately less performance for the money than the XTX. It was kind of basically saying, get an XTX. But again, I don't see any particular need to be angry about it. I just say, well, if you want the XTX, get the XTX. The XT, not great. I'm not going to be assembling a lynch mob and going down to AMD HQ. It's just, what's
Frank
that gonna solve?
Gazor, damn you! You know, like I could just see the torches lit. You know. Anyway,
you know, there's basically things are getting more expensive. That's the bottom line. And as I say, it's not just down to silicon. The world economy, we had this massive inflationary spike. It is that said, though, when we've got this really great system now, and one of our supporters helped put it together, an actual data scientist, where we can actually sift through all of the performance captures we do for every single graphics card and put together comparative data. And it is a bit depressing, I've got to say. That the number one graphics card is the 5080, but the number two graphics card is the 3080 4 years on. And, the 3080, you're quite right, Alex, it was a phenomenon for its time, to the point where everything that NVIDIA produced at the high end going forward just looked ridiculously expensive. The 3080 Ti, really bad. Not that much faster than the 3080, but horrendously more expensive. 3090, you could make a case for it because it was the Halo product and it had good uses for creators, but again, horrendously expensive. 4090, again, it kind of had the Halo product thing to it, and it was genuinely transformative in performance terms, but it was expensive. Things started to settle down a bit in the Super era with the 40 series cards, but ultimately the cost of a good 70 class product has gone up a lot. That's just the way it is.
Has,
yeah. I mean, if there was some sort of damning evidence that we were all being ripped off, then basically somebody would come along with a cheaper product, and we've kind of seen that with Intel in the budget space. But I honestly think they're either breaking even or making a loss on each product there, and they're not selling a lot of them.